Right, okay, so it's the 11th of May, 2021. Tonight's class is on wisdom. And trying to think what I would sort of say wisdom means. And essentially, I think wisdom sort of means knowing. I mean, we could probably refine that or disagree on it, but it essentially sort of means knowing, doesn't it? Wisdom, it's experience and knowledge and understanding and some instinct and intuition. But essentially, it's sort of knowing. And it's perhaps knowing things that's not obvious. If we all were described as wise, then it would be meaningless. It'd become a pointless phrase. If we were all tall, it'd be meaningless. If we're all short, described as short, it would be meaningless. If we're all described as wise, it would be meaningless. So wisdom seems to be this thing of knowing things that are not so easy to know. Things that are not so easy to know. And in tonight's class, the wisdom that I'm referring to is the knowing how things exist, as opposed to how they appear to exist. And why bother? Why bother with any of this? Well, it seems really odd, doesn't it, that our mind and our heart, our mind's busy without any effort as a child and growing up. Our mind's busy and our heart's disturbed. Our emotions are disturbed, even in our dreams, even when we just sit down with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And because that's pervasive through all sentient beings, unless they've, achieved some contentment, we don't query it. It's sort of getting queried because mental health is coming in, and it's like 1 in 4 people, 1 in 6 people, 1 in 2 people suffer from mental health issues. Well, 1 in 1 people, 1 in 1 person suffers from mental health issues. We all struggle. We all have worries and anxieties and struggle with sleep sometimes and grieve and get things wrong and misunderstand and project our own insecurities and project our own fears and have this shadow side that Carl Jung talks about, where we have parts of ourselves that we don't really want to admit and own and accept and see. So I think it's really quite wise to acknowledge, well, not to acknowledge, but it's hidden, this stuff. So because we say 1 in 4, 1 in 10 people have got mental health problems, we all seem to have this mass collusion that it's there's something must be wrong with our lifestyle or something as to why we're anxious. We sort of collude en masse. Well, it's the nature of existence to be anxious. But is it? Is that the way it has to be? And is there something that pervades everyone's mind so that we don't just get up in the morning and there's no discontentment there at all, ever again? And some people call that enlightenment, but why should that be amazing, great, amazing? It's not, it's just normal. It's a baseline, isn't it, to not be in pain? It's a baseline to not suffer mentally, emotionally. I don't see that as amazing. I see that as it's a baseline, it's a lack of suffering. Why should that be amazing? What is happening is that there's something below just okay. There's something below contentment, which is this discontentment. So contentment, stillness, discontentment, all this shaky mind, shaky heart sort of stuff. And what's causing that shaking? And for me, from experience, it's misunderstanding the way things exist, agitates the mind. And then from that, we get craving and we get anger. So we want to be with something forever, want to be away from something forever. Get away, I hate you, you're horrible, smash it up, get rid of it. That's the anger side. The opposite is, it's wonderful, never want to be away from it. Gollum's ring, give me the chocolate, whatever it might be. Reputation and money and career and all these sorts of things. And those two are sprouting out of misunderstanding the way things exist. Because it starts to agitate the mind, and it creates this delusion. mental misapprehension of things. If you're in a dream, or when you're in a dream, and it appears, unless you're lucid dreaming, it appears that everything in that dream is not in your head. The dream person is not in the mind. It feels like the dream person is a real person and they're running down a real road. Incredibly vivid. We develop fear from all that and all the rest of these different feelings. Only because our mind creates a me running down a road that appears to be separate from it. So in our dream, there's a complete, none of the objects that appear to the mind exist. The road I'm running down that appears to be separate from my mind doesn't exist. Now, there is a road appearing to the mind, but it's one the mind is creating. The road that the mind is creating as an image, that exists, that appears. In our dream, it feels like there's a real road that is separate from the mind. So constantly in our dreams, we're making this mistake. The tiger that chases us, that scares us. If the mind could comprehend that it was creating the tiger, it would relax. If we knew in our dream it was a dream, our mind would relax. And when people have lucid dreams, it's what they're doing. They're mindful in their dream. It's what they're doing. So they're aware of the nature of the dream. So if you were dreaming and you weren't lucid about it, and there was the fear of being chased by the tiger down a road, there would be the very strong belief of a tiger that existed without the mind, a person running away that existed without the mind, and a road that existed without the mind. It would feel like none of those objects were created by the mind. They were independent, inherently existent objects. None of those are being built inside our head. They don't exist. When we wake up in the morning, that road's not there, that tiger's not there, that you's not there. So the objects in the dream never existed. When we become lucid in a dream, and we realize that actually that the objects were then appearing are created by mind, those exist. And all because the nature of those objects are realized, all the fear falls away. All the fear falls away. So that the nature of the self in our dream is just that it merely appears to mind. The self in a dream merely appears to mind. When that is recognized, all fear falls away. Our waking world conforms to rules, scientific laws, if you like, repetitive actions like gravity, electromagnetic forces and such like. The clock doesn't go around weird like it would in a dream. But essentially, the nature of it all is appearance to mind. Now, it doesn't feel like that, but it doesn't feel like that in the dream either. So there must be a way of checking. So we need some way of being like a lucid dreamer, but being a lucid, awake person. And that's what awakening sort of means. That's what Buddha referred to as awakened. It's basically a bit like becoming a lucid dreamer in the dream, and all the fear falls away. We can do that in the waking world too. So right now in the waking world, I'm functioning a little bit like somebody who would come up to you in your dream and say, you're dreaming. In your dream, if somebody came up to you and said, you're dreaming, you would you wouldn't believe them. The dream person wouldn't believe the dream object or the person saying to the dream you're dreaming. And it's the same now. A lucid dreamer doesn't need anyone to come up and say you're dreaming, because they already know. So we have a bit of something to do in the waking world. There's opening the door, having a glimpse, having some methods, and there's lots of methods for checking whether this is dreamlike. Now, there are methods for practicing lucid dreaming, which is during the daytime, we can look at the clock regularly, and the clock will be the right sort of time. And if we check our hands, they look normal. I've read up on this, but there's a lot more to it, but basically. And what we're practicing, if we keep looking at our hand and the clock during the day, is we're practicing looking at those objects when we're in dreaming. And if we realize that our hand doesn't look right, or the clock's a weird time, and look away and look back and it's a completely different time, it's an opportunity for the mind to sort of try to jolt itself into recognizing it's dreaming. We need similar sort of things in our waking world as well. We can't look at the clock or our hand because our hand still looks the same. Clocks work, function. So there's different ways to do it in the waking world. Right, we're going to do some body relaxation and breathing meditation. And then I'll show you a method for calming the mind using what I've just talked about, sort of the wisdom approach. I won't record this because this is just the weekly thing. I'll pause and then I'll start again when we do the meditation on wisdom. Okay, so this meditation is one that I haven't been taught. It's just one that I've created myself. It may be a classic one or taught somewhere else. I don't know. Most things have been done before, but I found it very useful. What I like to do is think about something that has been bothering you, maybe from the past or current. Maybe it's a person, a relationship, a situation, a problem. It could even be something from the, for the future that you're worrying about. Pension money running out, or parents dying, or whatever it might be. Now I'd like you to imagine in your mind's eye this situation. I'd like you to imagine that you're dreaming this. Imagine that this situation is in a dream. Imagine that you're watching a version of yourself in this situation, and your mind knows that it's a dream. And imagine that you're lucid dreaming. Imagine that you realize that it's a dream. And you can ask yourself, how will this feel? How does this feel knowing that it's a dream? This situation that is occurring in the waking world. If it was in the dream world and I became lucid with it, how would I feel? For example, you're about to become bankrupt in real life, people commit suicide over this. Imagine this was occurring in a dream, a bankruptcy dream, and you were very frightened in your dream, and you became lucid that this was just a dream of bankruptcy. What would happen to your experience? Would you relax and think, oh, it's just a dream? What that really means is, oh, this is part of my mind. It's not separate from it. Oh, this is part of my mind. Just recognizing that this is part of my mind has an effect, doesn't it, with our emotions? So from seeing this, we can see there's a great opportunity to look at the way the waking world exists. There's a real opportunity to de-stress from testing whether the waking world exists as it appears to exist. Please stay in meditation. We're going to look at a way of examining whether the waking world is the way it appears. Does it appear? Do all the things exist from their own side without the mind creating them? So we think there's a forest. If we see a load of trees, we think there's a forest. I think there's an object, forest. How many objects? How many forests are there? We see a big lump of trees. One forest. If there's actually a forest out there, like it appears to exist separate from the mind, we don't think our mind has created the forest. If this is true, we can find the forest. So we start to have a little look. This is like becoming lucid in the dream. So imagine taking each tree and asking yourself, is this the forest? And if it's not, throw it away. Imagine you're looking at each tree. Is this the forest? And you throw it away. And now imagine you're doing it really quick and all the trees are starting to go. This tree is not the forest. This tree is not the forest. This tree isn't the forest. We get to the last tree. It's not the forest. If there was really a forest here in the way it appeared, we'd find it. All we find are individual trees. So our minds tricked us that there's this object forest. In seeing a group of trees, we believed there's an extra object forest. When we don't find it, this is akin to starting to develop lucid dreaming, but in the waking world. Imagine now all the trees to one side and the unfindability of the forest that seemed to exist separate from our mind is not there. Just like the real tiger in our dream that's going to kill us and hurt us isn't there. So just stay knowing that you haven't found the forest. We can do this with every object of the waking world. Science does it. As science looks into an atom, the atom seems to just not be there. There isn't the subatomic particles and the atom, because that would be two atoms. As we look in, the atom seems to just not be there. As we look into the electrons and protons and neutrons, as we look deeper, it's like they just cease to be there. There's not extra to them. And then we look into the subatomic particles and they don't seem to be there. And then we end up looking and it starts to become probability and waves and abstract. Every single thing that we seem to look at, if we look close, it seems to disappear. And that's because if something existed inherently separate from our mind, we would have to find it. But because it doesn't, we can never find this object that seems to appear. The illusion cannot stand up to close scrutiny. We just find different things as we look closer. In the same way that if we look closer to rainbow in the sky, if we go up there, it was never there. The rainbow we think was in the sky was never there. Can't bear to be looked at closely. The illusion falls apart. So if you'd like to finally notice a feeling, maybe if you've got a headache or a pain or a certain strong feeling, we're going to look into them closely. If they exist outside of ourselves, we'll keep finding it. If they don't, the mere observation will mean they can't stand up to the observation. They're not there. It's like going closer to the rainbow. So notice your feeling, or a pain, or a headache, or toothache, or armache, whatever it might be, emotion. Bring your awareness right into the middle of it. And then bring your awareness into the middle of that middle. And see if the object can sustain itself with this level of scrutiny. Look into the middle of something, and then look into the middle of that middle. A sensation, a feeling, a pain, even a thought. So we can do this any time. If we have a strong headache or feeling or emotion, thought, look into the middle of it carefully and look into the middle of that, even if it's just for a moment. The only reason it will come back into your experience is because the concentration of the mind isn't strong enough to stay with the illusory absence of it. The ignorance comes back as our concentration wavers. We can glimpse it, and that should be enough. It's like becoming lucid in a dream for a moment. So we can dedicate this listening to teachings and practice on wisdom to our own reduction and cessation of anxiety and worry. And recognizing things the way they are. And may everyone else find the same thing. And then when it feels comfortable, just gently allow your eyes to open. Thank you. So this is profound meditation. So don't worry if that didn't quite follow as I was going along with it. But what's happening is the mind is being challenged in the same way that we might practice lucid dreaming. Keep looking at the dream clock to see if it changes. We're starting to soften up our grip of unreality, the incorrect experience of reality. So don't worry if we have to do this time and time again. It softens it up. Well, thanks for joining me.